Alright, this is about Frank Miller. Frank Miller is an American comic book artist. You may have heard of him. You've probably seen some of his work without realizing it. 300 was a movie that was based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller, as was Sin City. And pretty soon Sin City 2 is coming out, as is a film adaptation of his graphic novel Ronin, which is highly based on samurai manga that was coming from Japan. Basically, the purpose of this video is to spread knowledge about Frank Miller amongst anti-American comic book heads that are out there on YouTube. I know there's a lot of them out there. They believe that manga is so totally superior to anything America is producing, which I think is complete bullshit. Everybody knows that American comics influence manga even more than manga has influenced American comics. The only reason people even come up with that conclusion because of how much the manga style of artwork is influenced American comics today. This is also partially the fault of American comic book artists who completely like rip off each other's artwork and art styles, and some many overrated comic book artists that I will not name, but you guys know who I'm talking about. But this isn't about that. This is about Frank Miller. And basically all you manga heads out there, you really need to get into Frank Miller. And the reason why is probably some of the best stuff you'll ever read. For the most part, if you want to start out, I say go pick up The Dark Knight Returns, which is probably the best Batman story ever written. The sequel has caught a lot of flack, but it was still good in my opinion. A lot of people, just like most sequels, people instill more hype than it needs, and it becomes what they don't expect it to be. But it was still a good story in my opinion. Sin City, of course, was awesome, as was 300. Ronin is one of Frank Miller's lesser known works, and from what I've read, it's pretty awesome. You should go check that out too. Also, Martha Washington Goes to War, which is a pretty good, interesting story about racism and warfare, and really big look at American politics and corporations and things like that. It's also a really good story. It should be checked out if it's back in print. I'm not real sure. Dark Horse hasn't announced anything if they're going to renew the series or put it back out. And talks are Frank Miller's doing a third part to Dark Knight, which I think would be pretty interesting. You can't wait for that. But anyway, pretty much Frank Miller's probably, in my opinion, he's a very big influence on me, and I think he's probably the greatest American comic book writer / artist to come out. I think he's one of the greatest in America that has the ability to do both. I mean, he can write and he can draw, which is, a common trait amongst Japanese comic book creators, and I think, it's often been emulated here. If you check out my Antarctic Press rant, Benda and Fred Perry are both guys who write and draw their own work. Of course, some comic book artists are not as skilled in this area. You can just look at Image Comics and how long it took for them back in the day to come out with new comics every month when they had to double up and write and draw, and they just didn't figure out how to do it. But Frank Miller did, and that's why he's one of the best. Now, back in the day, the person who did the coloring was Lynn Varley, who would end up being his wife. I don't think they're married anymore, but she did. I think she still does color his comics. And basically that's my rant. Post comments, leave comments. I don't care. If you hate me, I don't give a shit. Well, that's it. Peace.